Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Caps on Comics. I'm Kenny Caps, and tonight we're going to be discussing some little known facts about the first appearances of the Avengers. In part 3 of a 3-part series, we'll be discussing the last 11 Avengers. And like I've said before, instead of talking about these first appearances by date of publication, we're going to be looking at them from the Marvel Cinematic Universe standpoint, going from, in this episode, Avengers Age of Ultron in 2015 to Captain Marvel in 2019. Got it? Alright, let's get started. Alright, so the first movie that we're going to be looking at is Age of Ultron that came out on May 1st, 2015. Now, that was an awesome movie, alright, because it introduced to the MCU Pietro and Wanda Maximoff, also known as Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch. They both first appeared in X-Men number 4 in March 1964 and were created by Lee and Kirby. In the comic books, they were both mutants, and it's because of that simple fact that there was, at one time, 2 cinematic Quicksilvers, one played by Aaron Taylor Johnson in the MCU, and the other by Evan Peters, who played Quicksilver in the X-Men movies. This is because, back in the 90s, Marvel licensed the film rights of the X-Men to 20th Century Fox, who then created a film series based on that franchise, and they also licensed off tons of their other well-known characters to various studios across Hollywood. Sony got Spider-Man, Universal got Hulk, yada yada yada. Years later, Marvel decided to do their own films, which we now refer to as the MCU, and they focused on characters that had not been licensed to other studios, such as the Avengers. So, because Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch were part of both supergroups, the X-Men and the Avengers, a dispute between the two studios arose. Fox claimed the rights over them because they were mutants, while Marvel claimed the rights to them because Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch were more associated with the Avengers than the X-Men. Luckily, the studios came to an agreement that allowed both to use the characters, with the condition that Fox not mention them as Avengers and Marvel referring to them as mutants. Eventually, the arrangement became moot following Disney's purchase of 20th Century Fox, and that's why we got to see Peters play an imposter Pietro in WandaVision. While Scarlet Witch is prominent in the MCU, her Fox version has only been in like one movie. Next is Vision. Vision was created by Roy Thomas and John Buscema and first appeared in Avengers 57 in 1968. While working on the Avengers, Thomas wanted to add a new character to the roster. He was a huge fan of Golden Age heroes, so he first thought to bring back Arcus, a 1940s hero who had been called Vision due to his spectral appearance and smoke-based abilities. So, Thomas discussed the matter with Stan Lee, who liked the idea of a new member but didn't want it to be an alien or a visitor from another dimension. After he suggested creating a new character entirely and that it could be an android instead, Thomas compromised by creating a new android character who resembled Arcus and called him Vision. Alright, the next movie that came out was Ant-Man on July 17th, 2015. So the Ant-Man movie gave us 2 Ant-Mans. Ant-Man? Anyway, Hank Pym was created by Jack Kirby, Stan Lee, and Larry Lieber, and first appeared in Tales to Astonish number 27 in January of 1962. However, he wouldn't be Ant-Man until Tales to Astonish 35 in September of that same year. In 2008, Lee theorized as to why Ant-Man never became one of Marvel's top sellers or had his own book because even though he loved Ant-Man, the stories were never successful. In order for Ant-Man to be successful, he had to be drawn this small next to big things, and you would get great pictures that were visually interesting. The artists who drew them, no matter how much Lee kept reminding them, they kept drawing him small. Lee would say, Draw a matchbook cover next to him so that we can see the difference in size. But they kept forgetting, and that's why people weren't interested in Ant-Man, at least according to Stan Lee. Also in that movie, we're introduced to Scott Lang, all right? So Scott Lang was created by David Michelin, Bob Layton, and John Byrne, and first appeared in Avengers 181 in March of 1979. And the next month, in Marvel Premiere, he became the second Ant-Man. Michelin had always liked shrinking heroes and saw Hank Pym's return to Yellow Jacket as an opportunity to take over the Ant-Man identity. But he said he wanted something completely different from Pym in both origin and motivation. So he came up with the idea of a reformed criminal. Not like an unjustly accused, innocent kind of, thing, which would have been the expected angle. So he thought of a burglar, someone who enjoyed the adrenaline rush of the job. So the excitement of being a hero could actually fill that void, but in a legal way. Even though Lang's tryout in Marvel Premiere wasn't popular enough for him to get his own series, the concept of a single father / reformed criminal in a superhero role struck a chord with readers and led to Lang and Ant-Man enjoying modest popularity and frequent appearances later on. Alright, the next movie to come out is one of my favorites in all of the MCU, and that's Captain America Civil War. That came out in May 6th of 2016. Now from that movie, we're introduced to some really interesting characters, mainly Black Panther. Now there are a lot of interesting things to talk about with Black Panther, but let's start off with this. Black Panther was created by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby and first appeared in Fantastic Four 52 in July 1966. He is the first superhero of African descent in mainstream American comics, having debuted years before The Falcon in 1969, Jon Stewart in the role of Green Lantern in 1971, and Luke Cage in 1972. Now, there were black heroes before him, but there were very few, and none of them actually had any superpowers. These included the characters in the single-issue low-distribution All-Negro Comics #1 in 1947, Waku, Prince of the Bantu, who starred in his own feature in the title Jungle Comics from Atlas Comics, and the Dell Comics Western character Lobo, the first black person to star in his own comic book. Previous non-character black supporting characters in comics include Gabe Jones of Sergeant Fury and Jackie Johnson of Sergeant Rock. Alright, hold on to your butts because it's about to get crazy. So, Spider-Man is generally considered to be created by Stan Lee and Steve Ditko, and he definitely first appeared in Amazing Fantasy 15 in August of 1962. Now, I say that Lee and Ditko are generally considered to have created him because there is dispute out there that Kirby and Simon had a role in this whole thing. Spider-Man is by far the most popular comic book character from Marvel, and perhaps, some would say, the most popular comic book character, period. To begin with, I had always heard that Lee was inspired by seeing a spider climb up a wall, but it wasn't until recently that I heard that Lee cited the non-superhero pulp magazine crime fighter, the Spider, as a great influence. Okay, so that takes care of Lee. Now let's hear from Ditko. According to Steve Ditko, he said that one of the first things he did was to work up a costume, a vital visual part of the character. He had to know how he looked before he could do any of the breakdowns. For example, a clinging power so he wouldn't have hard shoes or boots, a hidden waist shooter versus a web gun and holster, etc., etc., etc. He wasn't sure Stan would like the idea of covering the character's face, but he did it because it hid an obviously boyish face. It would also add mystery to the character. Now things get really interesting here. Did you know that Kirby disputed Lee's version of the story and claimed Lee had minimal involvement in the character's creation? Crazy, right? Well, according to Kirby, the idea of Spider-Man originated with Kirby and Joe Simon, who in the 50s had developed a character called the Silver Spider for black magic, a comic book from Crestwood Publications. For some reason, Crestwood Publications decided not to use the character, and then Simon, in his 1990 autobiography, disputed Kirby's account, saying that black magic was not a factor and that he, Simon, came up with the name Spider-Man and then later changed it to the Silver Spider, while Kirby outlined the character's story and powers. Simon later stated that his and Kirby's concept became the basis for Archie Comics' superhero, The Fly. Steve Ditko stated that Lee liked the name Hawkman from DC Comics, and that Spider-Man was an outgrowth of that interest. Ditko recalled that Stan Lee gave him the premise of a teenager bitten by a spider and developing powers, a premise Ditko would expand upon to the point where he became the first work-for-hire artist of his generation to create and control the narrative arc. On the issue of the initial creation, Ditko stated, "I still don't know whose idea was Spider-Man." Kirby noted in a 1971 interview that it was Ditko who got Spider-Man to roll, and the thing caught on because of what he did. Lee, while claiming credit for the initial idea, has acknowledged Ditko's role, stating, "If Steve wants to be called co-creator, I think he deserves it." He has further commented that Ditko's costume design was key to the character's success. Who knows who really created Spider-Man? Maybe the reason he's so popular is because Spider-Man is the result of 4 of the most talented comic book creators' efforts, and it's all gelled into this nice fondue of awesomeness. The next movie to come out was Doctor Strange on November 4th, 2016. Doctor Strange was created by Steve Ditko and first appeared in Strange Tales 110 in July of 1963. Steve Ditko and Stan Lee have described the character as having been originally the idea of Ditko. In 2008, he wrote that on his own, he brought in to Stan Lee a 5-page pencil story with a page and panel script of his idea of a new, different kind of character. The character wound up being named Doctor Strange because he would appear in Strange Tales. Also, they were originally going to call him Mr. Strange, but the Mr. seemed too similar to Mr. Fantastic. The next movie to come out was Ant-Man and the Wasp, and that was on July 6, 2018. Now, this awesome movie introduced us to the Wasp, right? So Janet Van Dyne was created by Stan Lee, Ernie Hart, and Jack Kirby, and first appeared in Tales to Astonish number 44 in June 1963. She was a founding member of the Avengers, appearing in the first issue and giving the team its name. In his 1970s run on the Avengers, George Perez revamped the character's costume a whole bunch of times, having a significant impact on the character's development. He said that it became something of a joke. In the case of the Wasp, he noticed that she had so many costumes that eventually he said, "Why not?" And he wound up changing her costume so much that it became part of her persona. There's also Hope Pym, or Hope Van Dyne, and I don't have her first appearance, but she was created by Tom DeFalco and Ron Frenz and first appeared in A-Next number 7 in April of 1999. Hope Van Dyne might be a hero in the MCU, but her original iteration, Hope Pym, is a broken woman who wanted nothing but revenge. And the last movie we're going to be discussing tonight is Captain Marvel, that came out on March 8, 2019, and it's one of my favorite movies. And in that movie, we have Carol Danvers, who was created by Roy Thomas and Gene Colan, and first appeared in Marvel Superheroes 13 in March 1968. Later, Jerry Conway and John Buscema would revamp Danvers in 1977, giving her superhuman abilities and changing her to Ms. Marvel. And I've explained this before. When Ms. Marvel number 1 was published in 1977, the title was self-consciously socially progressive for its time because of the word Ms. was associated with the feminist movement. Danvers has been labeled as Marvel's most notable female hero and frequently described as one of the most powerful characters in the franchise. Well, that wraps up another episode of Caps on Comics and our 3-part series on the Avengers. Do you have a favorite Avenger, and if so, who are they? Please comment below and don't forget to like and subscribe. I'm Kenny Caps, and I'll see you in the next video.